The rain had been falling for 3 hours straight, when Natalie Norris decided she would rather drown than leave her favorite park bench without finishing the final chapter of her novel. She sat with her knees drawn up, the paperback clutched in both hands, utterly absorbed in the story despite the cold water soaking through her jacket and dripping from her dark hair. Her glasses were completely fogged, but she kept reading anyway, occasionally wiping them on her equally wet sleeve in a futile attempt to see the words more clearly. The park was deserted, as any sensible person had fled to shelter long ago. But Natalie had never been particularly sensible when it came to books. Yates Vance stood under the awning of the coffee shop across the street, watching her with increasing fascination. He had noticed her 20 minutes ago, when he stepped out for what should have been a quick break from the suffocating board meeting happening in the conference room upstairs. His company, Vance Global Industries, occupied the top 15 floors of the skyscraper behind him, and he had spent the entire morning listening to men in expensive suits argue about quarterly projections. The sight of this woman, completely drenched and completely oblivious, had stopped him in his tracks. He watched as she turned a page with waterlogged fingers, and something in his chest tightened. Without understanding why, he grabbed his black umbrella from where it leaned against the wall and walked across the street. The rain immediately hammered against the fabric as he stepped off the curb, but he barely noticed. His focus was entirely on her. When he reached the bench, he stopped a few feet away and simply held the umbrella over her head. He positioned himself slightly to the side so the shelter covered her completely, which meant the rain began soaking into his tailored suit almost immediately. The water ran down his neck, plastered his dark hair to his forehead, and turned his Italian leather shoes into ruined disasters. He did not move. It took Natalie almost a full minute to realize the rain had stopped hitting her book. She looked up slowly, blinking water from her eyelashes, and found herself staring at a man who looked like he had stepped out of a business magazine. His suit probably cost more than her monthly rent, though it was now thoroughly soaked. His strong jaw was set in concentration, and his gray eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You're getting wet," she said, which was possibly the most obvious statement ever made. "You were already wet," he replied. His voice was deep and carried a hint of amusement. "I figured one of us should stay dry. I'm not dry. I'm completely soaked. Then I suppose my timing was poor." He shifted the umbrella slightly to better cover her. "What are you reading?" Natalie held up the book, which was so waterlogged the cover was barely recognizable. It was the Count of Monte Cristo. Now it's more like the Puddle of Monte Cristo. The corner of his mouth lifted. "That's a long book to read in the rain." "I was almost done, just the last chapter." She looked at him more carefully, taking in the expensive watch, the confident posture, the way he held the umbrella without any indication he planned to leave. "You're going to catch pneumonia. Probably worth it." He said it so matter-of-factly that she did not know how to respond. "I'm Yates." "Natalie." She closed her book carefully, accepting that the final chapter would have to wait. "You can have your umbrella back now. I'll go home. I'll walk you. You don't even know where I live. Then you will have to tell me." He offered his free hand to help her up, and after a moment of hesitation, she took it. His grip was firm and warm despite the rain. "Unless you plan to sit here all night." "I was considering it," she admitted, standing. She was tall, but he was taller, and she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "The ending is really good. Better than getting out of the rain. Books usually are." Something in his expression softened. "I understand that feeling." They walked together through the downpour, sharing the umbrella that was really only large enough for one person. Yates kept it angled toward Natalie, which meant he continued to get drenched, but he showed no sign of caring. She kept glancing at him sideways, trying to figure out why a man in a suit that expensive was walking through the rain with a complete stranger. "You make a habit of rescuing people in parks?" she asked as they turned onto a quieter street. "This is my first time." "Do you make a habit of reading in storms?" "Only when the book is really good." She pushed her wet hair out of her face. "Or when I'm avoiding going home." "Why would you avoid that?" Natalie hesitated, then decided honesty was easier than deflection. "My apartment is small and lonely, and at least in the park I can pretend I'm alone by choice." Yates was quiet for a moment. "I live in a penthouse with 12 rooms and I eat dinner alone every night. I'm not sure size makes much difference." "A penthouse?" She looked at him with new understanding. "What do you do?" "I run a company. Manufacturing mostly. Industrial supplies, commercial equipment, nothing very exciting." He said it dismissively, as if running a company was equivalent to filing paperwork. "What about you?" "I'm a librarian at the public library downtown, so I spend my days around books and people who actually appreciate silence. It's perfect, except it doesn't pay very well." "But you love it, completely." Her smile was genuine and transformed her whole face. "Most people think it's boring." "Most people are wrong about most things." They reached a modest apartment building with peeling paint and a crooked front step. Natalie stopped and turned to face him, suddenly self-conscious about the contrast between his obvious wealth and her very obvious lack of it. "This is me," she said. "Thank you for the umbrella, and for getting soaked on my behalf." Yates looked up at the building, then back at her. Water dripped from his hair and his suit was ruined, but he seemed reluctant to leave. "Can I see you again?" The question caught her off guard. "Why would you want to?" "Because I've spent the last 30 minutes with you and I'm more interested in what happens next than I've been in anything for years." He said it simply, as if it were obvious. "Have dinner with me tomorrow." "I don't even know you." "That's generally why people have dinner together. To get to know each other." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card that was miraculously still dry in its leather holder. "My number, think about it." Natalie took the card and read it in the dim streetlight. "Yates Vance, CEO, Vance Global Industries." Her eyes widened. "You're the CEO of Vance Global. That company has buildings in 15 countries. 17 now. We expanded into Singapore and Morocco last month." He said it without pride or boasting, just stating facts. "Does that change your answer?" "I don't know," she admitted. "Why would someone like you want to have dinner with someone like me?" "Because you were reading in the rain. Because you made a joke about puddles while completely soaked. Because when I asked what you were avoiding, you told me the truth." He held her gaze. "And because I haven't felt this interested in talking to someone in longer than I care to admit." She studied his face, looking for signs of insincerity or ulterior motives, but found only genuine interest and a hint of vulnerability that made him seem more human than his title suggested. "Okay," she said finally. "Dinner tomorrow, but somewhere casual. I don't own anything fancy enough for wherever CEOs usually eat. I know a pizza place that makes everything in a wood-fired oven. Best pizza in the city, and you can wear whatever you want." "That sounds perfect." He smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes and made him look younger. "Tomorrow at 7, I'll pick you up here. You're going to show up at my building in whatever expensive car you drive and take me for pizza." "Is that a problem?" "It's weird, but I kind of like weird." "Good, so do I." He handed her the umbrella. "Keep this, I'll get wet going back." "You're already wet." "Exactly. What's a little more rain?" He stepped back, water immediately soaking him further. "Good night, Natalie." "Good night, Yates." She watched him walk away through the rain, his hands in his pockets, his stride confident despite the weather. When he reached the corner, he turned back and waved, and she found herself waving back with a smile she could not quite suppress. Inside her apartment, Natalie peeled off her wet clothes and took a hot shower, trying to process what had just happened. She looked at his business card, still sitting on her bathroom counter, and wondered if she had imagined the entire encounter. Men who looked like that, and had his kind of money, did not usually walk through storms to hold umbrellas over librarians. The next evening, Yates arrived exactly at 7 in a sleek black car that was definitely expensive but not ostentatiously so. He wore jeans and a dark blue sweater that made his gray eyes stand out, and he looked more relaxed than he had in the rain. Natalie had changed outfits 4 times before settling on a simple green dress and leather jacket, her hair finally dry and falling in waves past her shoulders. "You clean up well," he said when she emerged from the building. "So do you. Though I kind of like the drowned businessman look. I can stand in a fountain if it would help." She laughed, and he opened the car door for her before sliding into the driver's seat. The pizza place was across town, tucked into a neighborhood she had never explored, and the smell of wood smoke and baking dough filled the air when they walked inside. It was crowded and loud and completely unpretentious, exactly what she had hoped for. They talked for 3 hours. Natalie told him about growing up in a small town upstate, about her parents who had passed away in a car accident when she was 22, about how books had been her refuge her entire life. Yates told her about building his company from the ground up after inheriting a failing factory from his father, about the pressure of employing thousands of people, about how success had brought money but not necessarily happiness. "Everyone thinks being wealthy solves all your problems," he said, picking up another slice of pizza. "And it solves some, definitely, but it creates others. People treat you differently. You never know if someone wants to know you or wants to know your bank account." "Is that why you don't date much?" she guessed, watching his expression. "I don't date at all, haven't in 3 years. Every woman I met seemed more interested in the lifestyle than the person." He met her eyes. "You're the first person in a long time who looked at me like I was just a man holding an umbrella. To be fair, you were just a man holding an umbrella, a very wet man with questionable decision-making skills. The best decisions are usually the questionable ones." They shared a dessert, some kind of chocolate cake that was too rich but impossible to stop eating, and when Yates drove her home, Natalie found herself not wanting the evening to end. "Can I see you again?" he asked, walking her to her door. "You asked me that yesterday. And it worked out well. I'm trying the strategy again. Tomorrow I work until 8, but I'm free on Saturday." "Saturday, then. I'll plan something." He hesitated, then reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was gentle and intimate, and Natalie felt warmth spread through her chest. "I had a really good time tonight." "Me too. Despite the fact that you're a CEO who could probably buy this entire building." "Would it help if I promised never to buy your building?" "It would help. Though if my landlord ever decides to sell, all bets are off." He laughed and kissed her cheek before stepping back. "Good night, Natalie." "Good night, Yates." Over the next 2 months they fell into a pattern. Yates would finish work and pick her up from the library, and they would explore the city together. He took her to small restaurants and hidden gardens, to museums after hours and bookstores that stayed open late. She introduced him to her favorite coffee shop, where the owner knew her order by heart, to the park where she had been reading in the rain, to the simple pleasures of walking without a destination. She learned that he woke up at 5 every morning to go running, that he could cook but rarely did, that he played piano when he was stressed. He learned that she organized her books by color rather than title, that she cried at sappy movies but laughed at horror films, that she had a habit of rescuing injured birds, and nursing them back to health in her apartment. "You're a strange woman," he said one Saturday afternoon as she fed an injured sparrow with an eyedropper. "You're dating someone who reads in rainstorms. What did you expect? Fair point." He watched her gentle movements with the bird. "I like strange." Their first kiss happened on a Tuesday evening in late autumn. They had been walking along the river, the air crisp and cold, the city lights reflecting off the water. Yates stopped suddenly and turned to face her, his hands cupping her face with a tenderness that made her heart race. "I'm going to kiss you now," he said. "Unless you object." "I don't object." He kissed her softly at first, then deeper when she responded, and Natalie felt like she was falling and being caught at the same time. When they finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I'm in love with you," he said quietly. "I've been in love with you since I watched you reading in the rain and realized I would stand there all night if it meant staying close to you." "I love you too," she whispered. "Even though you're crazy and you ruined an expensive suit for a stranger." "Best investment I ever made." They stood there in the cold, holding each other, and Natalie understood that her life had divided into before and after this moment. Before Yates and after him. Before love and after it. 3 months later, Yates brought her to his penthouse for the first time. She had resisted, feeling uncomfortable with the visible reminder of their different economic situations, but he had insisted that she needed to see where he lived if they were going to keep moving forward. The apartment was stunning and sterile. Expensive furniture arranged in perfect positions, art on the walls that probably cost more than a car, floor-to-ceiling windows with views of the entire city. It was beautiful and completely impersonal. "It's like a hotel," Natalie said, walking through the rooms. "I know." Yates stood in the doorway watching her. "I never bothered making it a home. There didn't seem to be a point. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. Will you help me fix it?" She turned to look at him. "What do you mean, make it less like a hotel?" "Make it somewhere I actually want to be." He crossed the room to her. "Move in with me." "Yates, we've been together for 5 months. I know exactly how long it's been. 143 days since I held an umbrella over you in the rain. And I've loved you for 142 of them." He took her hands. "I don't want to spend another night in this place alone. I want books organized by color and injured birds in the bathroom and someone who makes fun of my questionable decisions. I want you." Natalie felt tears prick her eyes. "My lease is up next month." "Is that a yes?" "That's a yes." He kissed her, and for the first time since he bought the penthouse, Yates felt like he was actually home. Moving in together was an adjustment. Natalie brought her modest collection of belongings, which looked almost comical in the vast space, but she immediately set about making it warmer. She filled shelves with books, hung photos on the walls, brought in plants and soft blankets and all the small touches that transformed the sterile showpiece into an actual living space. Yates watched her work with undisguised happiness, helping when she asked but mostly just enjoying the sight of her making his space theirs. "I'm getting rid of this couch," she announced one Saturday morning. "It's beautiful, but it's like sitting on a board." "Whatever you want. I hated it anyway." "Then why did you buy it?" The interior designer said it was iconic. "It's iconically uncomfortable." They spent the day shopping for new furniture, arguing good-naturedly about colors and styles, and Yates found himself having more fun than he had in years. Watching Natalie debate the merits of different throw pillows was somehow more engaging than most business negotiations he had been part of. That evening, they christened the new couch by falling asleep together while watching a movie, tangled up in each other, and the soft blankets Natalie had insisted on. When Yates woke up at midnight with her curled against his chest, he thought about how empty his life had been before that rainy afternoon in the park. Work became easier with Natalie in his life. The stress of running a global company did not disappear, but it felt manageable now. He had something to come home to, someone who asked about his day and actually cared about the answer. She would listen to his frustrations about difficult board members or complicated negotiations, offering perspectives that were often surprisingly insightful. "You should hire more women," she said one evening as he complained about the lack of creativity in his executive team. "I hire based on qualifications, not gender. And yet your entire executive team is men. Funny how that works out." She looked at him over the top of her book. "I'm just saying, maybe the problem isn't that nobody's creative. Maybe it's that you've hired the same type of person 15 times and you're surprised they all think the same way." He thought about that for a long moment. "You're right. I usually am. You should write that down." 6 months after she moved in, Yates made good on her observation. He promoted 3 women to executive positions and hired 2 more from outside the company. The change in dynamic was immediate and positive, and when the next quarterly reports showed significant improvement, he made sure to tell Natalie she had been right. "Does this mean you'll listen to me more often?" she asked, grinning. "Let's not get carried away." She threw a pillow at him. Their relationship was not without challenges. There were arguments about money, particularly when Yates wanted to pay off her student loans and she refused, insisting on handling her own debts. There were moments when his work consumed him and she felt ignored, evenings when she wanted quiet, and he had business dinners that could not be avoided. But they learned to navigate the difficulties, to communicate instead of letting resentments build, to choose each other even when it was not easy. "I'm sorry I snapped at you earlier," Natalie said one night after a particularly tense argument about a charity gala she had not wanted to attend. "I know these events are important for your business. I'm sorry I dismissed your feelings." "You're right that it's exhausting to smile at strangers all night." He pulled her close. "Next time there's something you really don't want to do, just tell me. We'll figure it out. Even if it's important, you're more important." It was moments like these that made Natalie certain she had made the right choice. Yates could be stubborn and occasionally arrogant, but he loved her with an intensity that never wavered. He remembered small details, like how she took her coffee or which authors she was excited to read. He surprised her with first editions of her favorite books and never complained about the growing library that was taking over the second bedroom. He had learned to rescue injured birds alongside her, and though he was terrible at it, he tried. A year after they met, Yates took her back to the park bench where he had first seen her. It was a warm spring evening, and the park was full of people enjoying the weather. He had packed a picnic, which surprised her because he never packed picnics, and he seemed uncharacteristically nervous. "This is nice," she said, biting into a sandwich. "What's the occasion? It's been exactly 1 year since it rained, and I made the best decision of my life. It wasn't raining today a year ago. It was raining the day before. Close enough." He set down his food and reached into his pocket. "I have something to ask you." Natalie's breath caught as he pulled out a small velvet box. Her heart started racing, and she set down her own sandwich with shaking hands. "I fell in love with you watching you read in the rain," Yates said, opening the box to reveal a stunning ring with a deep blue sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. "I fell deeper in love with you every day after that. You made my life make sense. You made my house a home. You made me remember what it feels like to be happy." He took her hand. "Natalie Norris, will you marry me?" "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, absolutely yes." He slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her, and the people nearby started applauding. When they pulled apart, both laughing and crying, Natalie looked at the ring and then at him. It's blue like your eyes, she said. I thought you might appreciate something different than a diamond. It's perfect. You're perfect. This is perfect. She kissed him again. I love you so much. I love you too, even though you refuse to let me buy you a car. I don't need a car. We're going to have this argument for the rest of our lives, aren't we? Probably. Good. Planning the wedding became Natalie's favorite project. She wanted something small and meaningful, while Yates's business connections demanded a guest list that kept growing. They compromised on a medium-sized wedding at a historic mansion outside the city, elegant but not ostentatious, with personal touches that reflected their relationship. Natalie insisted on having a reading corner at the reception where guests could browse books that had been meaningful to them as a couple. Yates made sure there was a pianist playing throughout the evening, and he spent weeks practicing, so he could play one song himself during the reception. They wrote their own vows, and Natalie's best friend from the library served as her maid of honor. The wedding took place on a perfect October afternoon, the trees ablaze with fall colors. Natalie walked down the aisle in a simple dress that made her look ethereal, and Yates felt his throat tighten as she approached. When she reached him, she was smiling so wide that he could not help but smile back. "Hi," she whispered. "Hi yourself." The ceremony was beautiful and emotional. When it came time for vows, Yates spoke first, his voice steady despite the emotion behind his words. "Natalie, I spent years building a company and achieving everything I thought I wanted, only to realize I was completely empty inside. Then I saw you reading in the rain and everything changed. You taught me that success means nothing without someone to share it with. You made me laugh and challenged me to be better and loved me when I was difficult. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, and I promise to spend the rest of my life making sure you know how much you are loved." Natalie was crying openly now, and she had to take a moment to compose herself before speaking. "Yates, you held an umbrella over me while getting soaked yourself, and that was the most romantic thing anyone had ever done for me. Not because of the gesture, but because it showed me exactly who you are. You are someone who takes care of the people you love, even at your own expense. Someone who values books and kindness and injured birds. Someone who made me believe in love again when I had given up on it. I promise to be your partner in everything, to support your dreams and share your burdens, and to love you through every storm we face together." There was not a dry eye in the room by the time they exchanged rings and were pronounced married. The kiss that followed was tender and full of promise, and the applause that erupted made them both laugh. The reception was everything they had hoped for. Friends and family mingled, the food was excellent, and the music kept people dancing late into the evening. Yates kept his promise and played piano for Natalie, a beautiful piece he had learned specifically for this day, and she stood beside the piano watching him with such love that several guests commented on it later. When they finally left the reception, exhausted and happy, Natalie leaned against Yates in the car. "That was the best day of my life," she said. "Mine too, though the day I met you is a close second. Such a romantic. You knew what you were getting into." They honeymooned in Italy, spending 2 weeks exploring small villages and eating incredible food and forgetting about work entirely. Yates had never taken 2 weeks off before, and the freedom of it was intoxicating. They walked through ancient ruins and kissed in hidden gardens and stayed up late talking about their future. "I want kids," Natalie said one night as they lay in bed in a small hotel overlooking the Mediterranean. "Maybe 2 or 3. I want that too, though I have no idea how to be a father." "You'll figure it out. You figured out how to rescue birds." "Barely. Most of them still like you better." "Everyone likes me better. I'm delightful." He rolled over to kiss her. "You really are." Returning to real life after the honeymoon was jarring, but they settled into married life with surprising ease. Natalie continued working at the library, despite Yates's offers to support her if she wanted to pursue other interests. She loved her job and her co-workers, and she had no intention of giving that up just because she had married someone wealthy. "I like that you work," Yates told her when she brought it up. "I like that you have your own life and your own passion. It would be boring if you just waited around for me all day." "Good, because I'm not quitting. I would never ask you to." A year into their marriage, Natalie discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected for a week but waited to tell Yates until she was certain, and when she finally shared the news, his reaction was everything she had hoped for. His face went through shock, joy, and terror in rapid succession before settling on overwhelming happiness. "We're having a baby," he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "We're having a baby." He picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down looking worried. "Sorry, should I not do that? Is spinning bad for pregnancy? I'm not made of glass, but maybe save the acrobatics for later." "I'm going to be a father." He said it like he was testing out the words. "We're going to be parents. Are you scared, terrified, but also more excited than I've ever been?" He put his hand on her stomach, even though there was nothing to feel yet. "Our baby." Pregnancy suited Natalie. She glowed with health and happiness, and Yates became almost comically overprotective. He read every book on pregnancy and childbirth he could find, drove her to every doctor's appointment, and started converting one of the spare bedrooms into a nursery months before it was necessary. "You're nesting," she told him, watching him debate paint colors. "I'm preparing. It's different. You're definitely nesting. Maybe a little." They found out they were having a girl, and Yates cried in the ultrasound room while holding Natalie's hand. The technician smiled and said it happened more often than people thought, but Natalie knew it was more than that. She knew he was thinking about holding an umbrella over their daughter someday, about teaching her to be strong and kind, about all the ways he would love and protect her. Natalie's labor started on a Tuesday evening, 3 days before her due date. Her water broke while she was making dinner, and Yates went into immediate crisis mode, grabbing the hospital bag they had packed weeks ago and helping her to the car with hands that shook slightly despite his attempts at calm. "Remember to breathe," she said as they drove to the hospital. "I'm breathing fine. I meant for you, not me." "Oh, right." Labor was long and difficult, but Yates never left her side. He held her hand through contractions, whispered encouragement when she was exhausted, and advocated fiercely with the nurses when Natalie needed better pain management. When their daughter finally arrived, screaming and perfect, he cut the umbilical cord with tears streaming down his face. "She's beautiful," he said, watching the nurses clean her. "She looks just like you. She has your eyes. Poor kid." They named her Violet Grace Vance, and she was immediately the center of their universe. Yates had never understood people who claimed their lives began when their children were born, but holding Violet for the first time, he suddenly got it. Everything before this moment had been preparation. This was what mattered. The first few months were exhausting. Violet was a terrible sleeper, and both Yates and Natalie stumbled through their days in a fog of sleep deprivation. But there was also overwhelming joy in every milestone, every smile, every small sound their daughter made. Yates discovered he was surprisingly good at diaper changes and terrible at baby talk, while Natalie became an expert at nursing while simultaneously reading and eating. "We're doing okay, right?" Yates asked one night as they both sat awake at 3 in the morning, Violet finally sleeping in her bassinet between them. "We're doing great. She's healthy and loved, and we haven't dropped her yet. The bar is pretty low. That's parenting." When Violet was 6 months old, They took her to the park where Yates and Natalie had first met. It was a sunny afternoon, and they spread a blanket on the grass near the bench where Natalie had been reading in the rain. Violet gurgled happily, grabbing at grass and trying to eat everything she could reach. "Do you remember what you were thinking that day?" Natalie asked, watching Yates play with their daughter. "When you first saw me, I thought you were crazy, but also the most interesting person I had seen in years. I thought that anyone who loved books enough to read in a storm was someone worth knowing." He looked at her. "I thought my life was about to change, and I was right. Mine too. Though I didn't know it until you were completely soaked and still holding that umbrella. Best decision I ever made. You say that a lot, because it's true." Violet started babbling, and they both turned their attention to her, marveling at every sound like she was performing Shakespeare. Other parents in the park smiled at them, recognizing the slightly manic devotion of new parents, and Natalie felt a wave of contentment wash over her. Her life had not turned out the way she had expected. She had thought she would always be alone, always making do with her books and her small apartment and her quiet existence. Instead, she had found love in the rain, built a life with a man who valued kindness over status, and created a family that filled her heart to bursting. It was better than any story she had ever read. 2 years later, they welcomed a son, Nathaniel James Vance, who had his mother's dark hair and calm temperament. Violet was immediately obsessed with her baby brother, insisting on helping with everything despite being barely old enough to walk steadily. Their home became filled with the beautiful chaos of young children, with toys scattered everywhere and bedtime stories that stretched on for hours, and the kind of noise that only comes from a house full of love. Yates scaled back his work hours to spend more time with his family. He had spent years building Vance Global Industries into a powerhouse, but he was learning that success meant nothing if he missed watching his children grow up. He promoted a talented executive to handle day-to-day operations and focused on strategic decisions that could be handled in reasonable hours. His board was initially resistant, but the company continued thriving, and Yates was infinitely happier. "You're a good father," Natalie told him one evening after he had spent an hour building block towers for Violet to knock down while Nathaniel watched from his bouncer. "I'm trying. Some days I have no idea what I'm doing. That's every parent. But you show up and you love them, and that's what matters. I learned from the best." He kissed her forehead. "You make it look easy. It's not easy, but it's worth it." On their 5th wedding anniversary, Yates surprised Natalie by recreating their first date. He took her to the same pizza place, and they sat in a corner booth eating wood-fired pizza and talking like they had that first night. It felt both familiar and new, this relationship that had grown and deepened over the years. "You ever regret it?" Natalie asked. "Marrying someone so different from your world? Never. Not for a single second. You're the best thing that ever happened to me." He reached across the table to take her hand. "Do you regret marrying someone who still can't rescue birds properly?" "The birds and I have learned to accept your limitations. That's all I can ask for." They went home to relieve the babysitter and checked on their sleeping children, standing together in each doorway just to watch them breathe. It was a ritual they had developed, this quiet moment of gratitude before ending each day. "We did good," Yates whispered in Violet's doorway. "We really did." Life continued in its beautiful, messy way. Violet started preschool and came home with paintings that got hung on the refrigerator like priceless art. Nathaniel learned to walk and immediately started getting into everything. Holidays became elaborate affairs with too much food and too many presents, and the kind of joy that comes from being surrounded by people you love. Natalie's co-workers became extended family, showing up for birthday parties and Sunday dinners. Yates's company continued growing, but he had learned to keep it in perspective, to prioritize family over profit margins. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, 7 years after they met, Yates found Natalie sitting on their balcony reading a book while the rain fell around her. She was under the awning, perfectly dry, but it reminded him so strongly of that first day that he had to stop and watch her for a moment. "What are you reading?" he asked, stepping outside. "The Count of Monte Cristo. I finally bought a new copy after my first one was destroyed by rain." "Because of some guy with an umbrella." "Yeah, because of him. He turned out to be pretty great, though." She looked up at him with a smile. "Changed my whole life. He sounds incredibly handsome and charming. He's moderately attractive and occasionally charming, but I love him anyway." Yates sat beside her and pulled her close, and they watched the rain together. Inside, their children were playing with the nanny, their laughter drifting through the open door. The city stretched out below them, busy and vibrant and full of life. Somewhere out there, other people were having their own moments of connection, their own chance encounters that would change everything. But here, on this balcony, Yates and Natalie had everything they needed. They had built a life together from one impulsive decision on a rainy day, and it had become more than either of them could have imagined. Not perfect, because nothing ever was, but real and full and deeply, wonderfully happy. "I would do it all again," Yates said quietly. "Every single part. Even the part where you ruined your suit. Especially that part." Natalie closed her book and kissed him, soft and sweet, while the rain continued falling around them. And if anyone had been watching, they might have wondered at the contentment on their faces, the ease of two people who had found their home in each other. But nobody was watching, and that was fine. Some stories did not need an audience. Some love was just for the people living it, building it day by day through small choices and big commitments, and the simple decision to keep showing up for each other. Yates had held an umbrella over a stranger in the rain 7 years ago, and she had smiled at him despite being soaked through. From that moment, everything had changed. They stayed on the balcony until the rain stopped, talking about nothing important and everything that mattered, their hands linked together, their future bright and certain. And when Violet called for them, they went inside together, ready for whatever came next, knowing that as long as they had each other, they could handle anything. It was not the ending Natalie had imagined all those years ago when she sat alone in the park reading her book. It was better. It was real, and it was theirs.